Okay. I think we'll just begin. So, thank you for coming in. This is the second ever session of the Desi Product Bar. This is Ask a Producer Anything, episode 1 actually. We are live streaming over YouTube for the first time actually. And what we have here today, we have an expert panel of founders and game producers. We have Tejas from, who's the founder of Kaijo. I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. And then we have Akhil. Quijo. Interesting. Cool. And we have Akhil Dev, who is a senior game producer at Ruby 7 back in Kerala. I've had the good fortune of working with him while we were in Nukebox together. Richard Francis. Hi, Peter. Sorry, hi, Akhil. And okay, we also have Richard Francis, who is an associate producer at Ubisoft.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. And we also have Nijo, who's a senior game producer at Moonfrog. I used to work at Moonfrog too, but no, we never worked at Moonfrog together. Yeah. So I would like to hear about how Moonfrog is doing these days and whatnot. That would be something I am excited about. And we have a bunch of people who have joined us, and this is Ask a Producer Anything. So any question goes and anybody can answer. Okay. And I think before we open it up to questions, open up the floor to everybody and let everybody ask questions, I think I should raise this question, which I get a lot, and this is one of the most frequently asked questions, so I'll just put it down right away. The first question is how is a producer different from a product manager, and what's the difference in the activities that these two people do, and what is the difference in the responsibilities? So I get this question a lot, and the thing is the answer differs a lot from company to company actually. Right. So I would like to hear the approach that you guys have, and if possible, since the answer could differ from studio to studio, I'd like to hear from all of you guys. I think we should let Tejas begin.
Okay, cool. So I've had several different ways of looking at the relationship between a producer and a product manager. But specifically in our case, something that only EA used to do, we also had this role called a development director or a development manager. So producers traditionally, at least as far as I've seen most companies, right, they're responsible for both the product owner role, but also the sort of scrum master role of the scheduling and budgeting.
Right.
At EA, largely the development director is the person who is responsible for budgeting and schedules and whatnot. In our world, and that's something we're still following a little bit in our indie setup.
Right.
A producer is basically the product owner or the player's voice. So what is the best thing to build next that a player values or will drive more value for the game is what a producer will evangelize or help decide. Right? And in that scenario, a product manager is an expert who will help find the solutions or the problems that are related to those high level goals. Say for instance, the players are having a hard time connecting with each other or competing or whatever, our retention is low, things like that. Sure, at some point the data might even come from a product manager that these are our stats right now of how the game is performing, and this might be lower than the global average, or hey, we might be able to make a lot of improvements in this area. But then the product owner or the producer would be hey, from the business side, revenue is an issue or engagement is an issue. But again, I don't know, there's different, it's not there's no easy rule book, right? So it's about prioritization. So that's what a product owner would also do. So the producer would in that sense help prioritize and be a voice for the players as well, for the game to move forward. And in some cases, they'd also think about how it needs to be done or if it can be done based on the scheduling and whatnot. Right. In EA, usually that would be a development director.
Okay.
So yeah.
Nijo, I think at Moonfrog things are a little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, Moonfrog things are a bit more different. In Moonfrog, actually, the producer plays a key role in people, actually.
Right.
How well the team is together. The team's output is questioned against the producer. And output definitely means that if you are the team is expected to work more than what they're normally supposed to. More as a not in terms of hours or anything.
Right.
The team performs better together. So your role will be there as a facilitator to whatever is required there.
Right.
Like there is this. Tejas already covered the voice of a user and the scheduling part of it. So there is a fun answer which I have gotten from one of my executive producers. His name is Vishesh. So one person asked him, "Hey, Macha, what does producer do?" He said, "Macha, I repair the coffee machine."
Yeah, everything is the producer's responsibility at the end of the day, right?
So I like the analogy there because he says that what is a company with a bad coffee machine?
Okay.
Sure, work gets done, but you would hate it, right? Because you really can't get a break.
Right.
So that kind of culture, the producer to actually support in Moonprog. The culture goes bad. When I mean culture, a collective actions that people do gets bad. It falls back on the producer.
I've heard this.
Then delivery, yeah.
I've heard this thing that this is one simple way to put it. One is that the product manager figures out what needs to be done.
Yes.
Okay, and the producer figures out how it should get done.
Exactly. That is what I was next coming to actually. Like we say that leadership defines why. Like let's say a GM or a CEO defines why.
Right.
The product managers define what.
Right.
And the producers define how.
How.
Obviously, there are overlaps. Like
right.
What and how.
Right.
Moonfrog, I can tell you that producers are an equal partner for the product manager.
Right.
While product manager dive deep into the problem statement, producers go wide and solve the problems across.
Right. Akhil and Richard, would you like to add to this?
So it's more or less what these guys kind of summed up. There's not much that I can add to it because from organization to organization, the roles and responsibilities vary. I mean, if you have to take my example, when I was working at Ruby 7, as a producer, I had a lot of product/business responsibilities as well.
Right.
Which was not the case when I moved to Ubisoft and to the the next company that I worked with after Ubisoft.
Right.
So yeah, it again depends on organizations and how they would like to see a producer perform in their respective roles. So in Ubisoft and for that matter, when I was working with Wargaming as a co-dev, producers' responsibilities was purely on the level of managing the teams and the deadlines and the milestones, making sure that the ceremonies and everything were running properly, the right messages and the information was conveyed to the stakeholders, etc., etc. So it was more on the process lines of things, making sure that things are run properly, making sure that everybody had everything at every point.
Okay.
So yeah.
I would like to raise one more question. I think we will go in the reverse order this time, and we'll let Akhil Dev start with the answers. Can you guys tell me, what is the most difficult part of being a producer? What's the most difficult part of your job? Akhil, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I was on another call. Sorry, guys. Where are you?
So I was asking, what's the most difficult part of being a producer? What is the difficult part of your job?
So, every day is different for a producer, right? Especially when the game is live and we have multiple teams to coordinate with, and in Ruby 7, basically I'm handling 4 different projects, and every time if there is any discrepancies in the game, we have to jump in. So
Richard,
most difficult.
Richard, would you like to add to that?
Hello.
As far as I'm concerned, I would say it's the people management aspect of the job that is new. Because everything else that comes with the job is something as a producer that are things that as a producer that you have to learn or imbibe or start doing at some point. But at the core of it, I believe people management is what a producer should be extremely good at, and if you kind of fail at that, I think that kind of shows that you still need to up your game and get your shit together if I'm doing that.
Right.
I mean, that's been my personal mantra because, I've had some experiences at the start of my career
Right.
Where I was still trying to figure out what the whole job was all about.
Right.
So, and as and when I moved jobs and, worked with different teams of different, from different, how do I put it? Different people exposed to different culture, working styles and culture for that matter. I realized that is one aspect of the job which is extremely challenging, at the same time rewarding as well.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, that's what I feel. As a producer, you should be focusing all your energy towards. Of course, the other your core part of the job is equally important, but often I felt that there are times people sort of forget that. I might be making a very scandalous statement with that, but yeah, I'm just putting it out there.
Nijo and Tejas, before we come to Nijo, I think Tejas being in a peculiar position where he's also the founder, there is no that is the highest level of responsibility, basically, right? I've been a indie game founder for 2.5 years, and I remember being very passionate about those timelines, because if I miss it by a few weeks, I'll have to shut down, basically. So it's not as simple as like, hey, you're gonna get written up, or you'll have to have a difficult talk with your CEO. Sort of like when you're a founder, then it's different, right? Tejas, what do you want to add to that? Like, how does it feel? What is your toughest part of your job?
So, I mean, I have a very similar answer for both cases, right? Even if you're a producer or if you're a founder. If you're a founder, the stakes are just so much higher, and it's easy to stay motivated yourself. Because if you don't work and you don't get shit in order, the company will fall apart. So the stakes are just so much higher. But even for a producer, like my thing would have been, it's just the tight balancing act that a producer has to go through, right? Even if you're like more of a schedule person, but like I break it down into 3 parts. The first is like motivating the team for like the feature or the work that we're doing, right? Like get evangelizing and getting everybody on the same page of what we need to do next, and then still having the everybody who's working have a sense of ownership and like freedom of like experimenting or finding the best way to get to where we need to go by experimenting or iterating or whatever. And the third, which is the hardest part, is keeping everybody on schedule or on track, because the more you allow them to iterate or figure out solutions, the more likely it is that we will miss deadlines. So it's like all of these 3 together. If you're able to manage the tight work, you'd be on time, high quality product, exactly what you need, just when you need it. But like let any of those phases, like if you drop the ball or if you go too far in that, then you'd basically be again not hitting whatever targets you want. So
right. So I used to sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, as a founder, it just becomes a lot more important, because for me, it's like the big revelation was not the whole game development process or the ownership process. It was taxes. It's like,
okay,
there's just so much to do, right? And then you realize the importance of having people focused on some specific problem areas, because then you can get much more higher quality results, because there's just so much to do.
Right.
It's hard to I find it very difficult to see how like solo developers make such amazing games and then still manage to keep doing it one after the other. So you really need you see the importance of a good team. I
used to say that. I don't say that anymore though. I used to say that prioritization was the most difficult part for me. Mainly being brutal about your prioritization. There are 10 things that you want to do, and you have enough timelines for 3 of these, or another set of 4 of those, and you have to figure out, given your budget, your team's capability, and what you need to do, which means you are going to kill some of those things that you want to do but you can't yet, and that can be really tough. But over time, and as I grew older, I kind of realized that it is managing people is the most difficult thing, because you really can't manage people like it's a thing, right? You really cannot manage people. You can only motivate them and guide them, and people are so complex that they'll just find their own path through life, and it's just very difficult. There is no API documentation to people. Like, you cannot be like, press this button and get it done. So that's just my approach to this problem. Like, Nijo, what do you think? What's the toughest part of being a producer?
And I think the person who comes last, most points are covered already. But just summarizing what everyone else is saying, I think the problem is that for producers, the problem statement is defined very widely, not very deeply or not very focused.
Right.
Like, you are kind of responsible. Like, for example, like how Tejas said, taxes. Okay,
right.
Have you taken care of the profit margins?
Right.
Like how Richard said, it's the people.
Right.
So, and that kind of differs from project. Forget even company to company, right? Even in a company, like what my team faces is not what the other team facing.
Right.
Even in project to project, that expectation change. So you will have to wear multiple hats, and you need to figure out what hat to wear at what time. I think that decision making is a tough process for, like you said, maybe it's a prioritization hat you need to follow, or maybe you're a friend to support these guys and go out for a drink.
Right.
So you need to keep managing these hats actually.
Right. There's something that we used to say at Nukebox from the beginning. We used to say that everything is the producer's fault. So it means something else than what is obvious. So when things go wrong, people tend to jump into a finger pointing game, and we wanted to avoid that, and we started saying internally, hey, everything is the producer's fault. So what would happen is that something goes wrong and people will be like, hey, he didn't do it, that guy didn't do it, oh, I forgot that, he didn't follow a checklist. And then everybody's like, okay, leave it, it's the producer's fault, let's fix it, right? So we kind of did that in the early stages of Nukebox, and it kind of helped the culture a bit. And what I kind of realized is that everything is in fact the producer's fault. You have your team working at 11:30 on a crunch, on a deadline, and they are not fed, it's your fault. Like you have to go out and arrange food for them. Everything from that to making sure everybody in your team gets home safe, and fixing the coffee machine and making sure the schedule is realistic so that people have a decent work-life balance, and making sure that the right features are being worked on. Everything eventually becomes the producer's fault, because if something goes wrong and you start passing the buck, you can pass the buck until it comes to the producer, and the producer cannot pass the buck to anybody, right? So you should basically take responsibility and just get that stuff done, whatever it is. That's the kind of
right, man. Like what you said, right? I'm just looking at the other angle.
Right.
Like the hardest part for me always has been that whenever something goes wrong, I tell to myself that you could have done something. Let's say one of my team members is burned out.
Right.
I kind of have this feeling in my head, dude, you should have done something about it.
Right.
If the project gets delayed, if there is a bug released to production, you always feel like, shit, I should have done something about it.
A big part of your jobs is actually red flagging things before it happens, right? You're that person who is like watching the team and be like, anything that's going to go down, anything that's going to go bad, you need to know a week or two in advance so that you can prepare for it. And the thing is, there is this term called producer paranoia, which Mark Skaggs taught me about. Okay, so I intentionally developed producer paranoia. My boss Amit used to make me write all the risks of any project I'm working on, all of that into a spreadsheet, at any given stage, and have written risk mitigation plans for all of that. And this kind of gave me this sense of producer paranoia, which is like, at any given time, I know the list of all the 17 things that can go wrong, and if one of them goes wrong, I have a plan in place. So I really felt that being able to detect a bad incident before it happens and being able to fix that in advance is very helpful.
That's producer paranoia channel the right way, Peter.
Yeah, in the wrong way. It has
no way to do it other than via risk register.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I will open up the floor for everybody. We have a lot of people here today. We have Venkat, Suraj, Shashikiran, Ramya, Naveen Krishnan, Angel Varghese, lots of people who are not producers, I guess. Okay. We're going to take the first question from the audience. Anything goes. You can ask anything. Anybody can ask a question.
Hey, I have a question.
Okay.
So I understand that producer's primary role is people management by a discussion, and my question is kind of a two-part question. I want to ask, what are the different types of difficult people you usually do when you're working? And what is the strategy to handle them? Like, I'd like to hear this from all of you.
Remy, what was the last part of your question? I didn't get that.
What are the different types of difficult people you work with on your daily job, and what are the strategies you use to handle them on the job?
Okay. So, just slightly correcting one thing. I don't agree that producers' primary responsibility is people management. It is people management, but it's just not people management, right? You need to take care of the product also. You need to understand business. Then you need to figure out how to marry business and people together. So, people managers are essentially, like, for example, engineering managers are there, QA managers are there, who just take care of the people aspect, right? But as a producer, you need to understand about business, what is good for my business, what is good for my team, and then marry it together.
And
now,
okay,
Tejas, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I was saying like the people management is more relevant where it comes to like how it's affecting your day-to-day work to the project or how you're building a feature. Because as you said, right, like as Anija was saying, there's engineering managers who are talking about your aspirations or your goals or your how you're performing, how your skills are growing. So your technical skills or like things like that, you'd have your sort of line managers, if you'd say, right? So those would be the very specific people management things. But I think in general, like to your question, like some of the people I've had mostly issues with are people who have like the right intentions, but like different sort of ways to approach a problem, right? You can have the same issue with like people who are junior and different issues with people who are more senior, right? Junior people, there could be issues where they're not able to take or like not willing to accept feedback in a more constructive, positive manner, right? With that, you have to work with having a more fact-based approach of giving qualitative feedback of what they were doing, why it's good, why it's not good, how they can do better, and how it affects the team or the project. On a senior level, like it could be a thing where people have the right intention, but they're giving wrong advice or wrong solutions to stakeholders, where you're wasting time iterating on things where you think that might be more efficient doing things different ways. So then it comes down to more about how your process works, how you like. There's a very cool Amazon strategy of disagreeing and committing, where how your like decision making works, where you can disagree with each other, but then you pick a course of action and then commit to like getting it done or like solving the whatever goals you have set. So targeting those. So it's very different at different levels, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, again, like the producer has a lot more things going on. Where I think like over the course of this whole session, we'll probably come to realize that like starting from no clear job description to the kind of things you have to handle, a producer is basically like your production jack of all trades who has to figure things out on the fly and even like come up with what is the right solution in what scenario. Because it's very hard to come up with a guidebook of like, for engineering, I find it so much easier. Oh, there's an issue. Oh, what's my call stack? I can debug something or I can find an issue and fix it. With production, it's a lot harder to come with a rule book of like what's the right decision to make. So it's a lot more about good decision making. So yeah.
Okay, guys, would you like to add something, Akhil?
Not much actually. So the senior and junior employees that they just had given you this example, and on top of it, there is when it comes to cross-functional, there are artists and QA team and developers, and how difficult when it comes to these three team members, right? So artists having more like a creative mindset, and when it comes to the overall picture, they might actually tend to stress a bit in terms of coming up with their own ideas and impose us to do that. So in such situations, we have to give them the overall picture in a layman terminology and explain them this is what we benefit by selecting this idea. So yeah, I just want to add that.
Okay. Okay, Ramya, does that answer your question, or do you want to add anything onto that?
I think yes, it partly answers my question.
Right. I think.
Another part, Ramya.
See, I understand that being a producer is not completely about people management, but if you look at it like, it's a jack of all trades. Right? So basically, you're interacting with different departments. So if I look at engineering manager or manager of art team, like they have specific kind of people they deal with. So you, as a producer, you have to do a lot of what do I say, cross-functional communication. So there are times when you'll have, like what Akhil said, there'll be disagreements between teams and between people on how they would like to take a certain projects. So how would you handle these situations?
If I may try answering this question, there are multiple ways this could end up. In some companies, you have departmental head sort of. You have a lead art producer, and you have an engineering lead, and you have a QA lead, and the producer only talks to these people. In another situation where things are more egalitarian and consequently more chaotic, you might be talking to every team member at the same time. You might have an authoritarian system where you just feed up, fill up a Jira or something with tasks, and things just get done because they are supposed to get done. Or you might be in a more of an indie setup where you have to sell your idea to the team, convince the team why we need to get it done, and then motivate them and guide them to do that. So things can change a lot as far as a producer is concerned. But what really matters when it comes to people management is understanding and empathy, according to me. Like, if you understand everybody that's in your team has a story that they are leading, they have their own life story, they have experiences that they've gone through which has molded them into who they are. If you have a QA lead with a short temper, you have to understand like what life he has gone through and why he is that way. If there is a engineer who insists on extensive documentation, you need to go back and understand what hell he went through in his previous job to end up that way. Okay, so I think instead of thinking of people as difficult or easy, we should not, it's not as binary and simple as that. People are very complex systems, and it's very hard to understand them. But if you put in the effort and invest some empathy into understanding people, you really can understand why people behave sometimes the way they do. And if you can do that, you could avoid conflicts, or at the worst case, when conflicts do happen, you can resolve them pretty well. That is my take.
I absolutely second what Peter voiced just right now, and I'm also more or less coming from that kind of an approach. So whenever I've had issues, not whenever I've had issues. So basically, what I try to ensure whenever I join a team is to make sure that I get to know the team and every individual inside out, so that whenever such issues or conflicts occur, we will know where they're coming from, why they're saying that, so that we can either resolve it at our end, or maybe redirect them to the right set of people, or the right individual to get it sorted in the proper manner. So that's been my approach. I mean, of course, there are difficult people to work with in every team, but I mean, even in my last job, I've had like really difficult teams and people to work with. But once you get to know where they're coming from and why they're the way they are, it's a lot easier for you as a producer to keep your cool and listen to them, which is a very important quality that a producer should have, as far as I'm concerned. That you should listen to them, understand where they're coming from, and then, like you said, redirecting or channeling them to the right stakeholder, or resolving it at your level if it is even possible in the first place.
I think that is a pretty good answer, Richard. Like, Ramya, does that answer your question? Does that satisfactorily?
Yes, totally.
Okay, I'm gonna leave the door open to all sorts of questions from everybody. We have more people here. The floor is open. Anybody? Okay, in that case, I'm gonna put a question down so that we can discuss about.
Peter, can I chip in? It's Sanjay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so before I pop the question, just like to add that I have had the good fortune of working with 3 of the panelists that we have today.
Awesome.
So Akhil, Nijo, and Richard. So, yeah. So, yeah.
And
So
I've
anyway,
heard about you from at least two of
Answer
those
belongs
guys.
to you here. Whatever Sanjay is coming up with.
No, fun fact before Sanjay gets his bets in. I started my producer journey by taking handover from Sanjay. So
Oh,
all the
okay.
blessings that I have is from Sanjay right now, right, Sanjay?
Nice.
Me too.
yeah. So now it's more like someone who has introduced them to drinking. So yeah. Thank you for that.
That's a good way to put it. Go on, Sanjay. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. So I don't know how which I've had for a while, and I believe all three of them. Tejas, I believe I haven't.
You were breaking, Sanjay.
Your voice is
Actually,
breaking.
I'm not familiar with Tejas, but it's something which. Yeah. So okay. How about now? Hello.
Yeah, better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is: this is something which I have fielded a few months when I meet a new producer who's working on a small studio. What they ask is they are working on casual games. So what exactly or how exactly should they scale up their skills in order to, let's say, move into console games as a producer? Is that a question which can be answered? Because the next time when someone asks me that question, I would better have an answer for it.
Is there anybody who has experience doing that?
I would be one, but I would say it was more of a chance happening. I would say I was just lucky because I know they felt that I was good enough to be hired, and I got hired. But if considering that I am back in the AAA environment right now, and having had the fortune of working with big AAA studios, I think it all comes down to how good your production level knowledge is. That is in terms of understanding the different pipelines, understanding the different processes involved in it, how exactly you would go about dealing with different stakeholders, and even it even comes down to how well aware you are aware of the market as such.
Right.
I know it was a very vague answer, but this is what I've understood from the many interviews that I've given in the last couple of months with various studios. But then again, another important factor is also that the titles and the experience that you have. So that I think that has actually played a part in at least again, it's personal experience I'm talking about. So let's say to give you guys an example, in the past couple of months, I've had interviews with companies like Avalanche, Ubisoft Germany, even I forgot, but then yeah, I believe the only reason that I got was even accepted for a screening call or an interview was simply because that of that one single experience, or the two experiences that I have, basically one with wargaming and the other with Ubisoft.
Right.
That led me to at least get a chance for a screening call and then further interviews. So it's a mixed bag. I am not experienced enough to say what exactly qualifies you enough to make the transition into the AAA environment. But yes, the real good understanding of production process and knowledge, and if there's a way you can convey that, then that is real. That'll be really beneficial. To give you guys an example, so there's someone from wargaming that who's been a mentor for me during my last 2 years. So what he suggested is that there's a growing trend among producers where they would tend to create a portfolio set, which is unheard of as far as production roles are concerned. Everybody has portfolios, but even engineers for that matter, in the recent times I've observed that they're making GitHub repositories and pages to showcase their talent as such.
Right.
So similarly, what he suggested is that there's a growing trend among production roles where you kind of try to put yourself out there by preparing a deck for yourself, basically showing what you're good at, what you're capable of, your experience, your growth, what your aspirations are. Something on those lines. It's very rudimentary at the moment, but what he said is that there are a lot of people who are trying this out, and it's turning out to be sort of an eye catcher.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I have some views on this.
Sure.
So it also starts with like one of the misconception I think like freshers have on like what it means or what it takes to be a producer. Because I've heard a lot of college kids be like, "Hey, I'm doing this game design course and I want to be a producer right after my college."
Yes.
So that's not something that works, at least in the real world, because a producer is sort of a leadership position who's been through the trenches, right? Like you need to know what good looks like, what it really means to make a game, what goes into making a game.
Right.
And similarly, like when you're going into AAA, like the difference is just the scale, because there are mobile games which take 2-3 years, 4 years to make, and in terms of scale, they're also like 80, 100 people with millions and millions of dollars in revenue. So or like sorry, even budgets. So if you're working on that scale, right, the transition to a AAA studio is not that hard. We had people from PopUp move from like leadership positions from there to being the exec producer on Fortnite and all, and it was a like relatively easier thing to do because they've already worked at that level where you're working with like hundreds of people with like millions of dollars of budgets and years of timeline with a lot of moving pieces with like voice actors or motion capture and all. So it's more about the scale. Like if you're working on a mobile game with like 3 people, 4 people, it'll be very difficult for you to even manage a very small feature in a AAA game because the scale and scope is so high.
Makes sense. Yes.
So it's more about like the scale, I'd say, and then it's just a natural.
Do you think the domain is such that you were in would matter? Because you just mentioned someone moved from PopCap to working on Fortnite. So both are like live products. Does such things come into play, or do they factor in when they're considering the move?
I think for sure, but I'd say that it's again the kind of work, right? Because what you're doing, like if you're looking at updates or live ops features and whatnot, so what kind of problems have you solved when you're doing roadmaps or like getting updates done or like even products built from scratch? Like if you're looking at a roadmap of 2 to 3 years, there's a lot that can go wrong, and if you've gone through that whole process and you like finally managed to release the game, or even in some cases not even managed to release it on time, because there's so much to be learned from that. But it's what you've learned from all that experience that you're bringing into the new studio is what will be looked at. Because it's not always that every project you work on will be the most ideal, perfect thing that you ever work on. Half of them might end up in failure, but that's what your learning is, that hey, these are the things that we did that didn't work, and these are the things that we did work. So in these projects, at least like you know what to look for.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Anybody would like to add anything?
I think one of the thing is, but there is a lot of overlap between a casual game producer and a AAA game producer in terms of people management, right? If you can get strong on people management aspects in terms of your leadership skills, your communication skills, your conflict resolution skills, I think all that will, I'm speculating, all that will probably be a good base for
it should be
industry, right? Yeah,
you're right, Nijo. To a great extent, you're right, because during my first gig at Ubisoft, it was a whole lot of people management after a point. I mean, there is a time period during which you are like grinding your way through Excel sheets and making sure that everything is up and running in Jira and whatnot, and making sure the numbers are correct, providing reports and whatnot to these stakeholders. So there is a phase where you are more of a project manager than a pure producer. Then comes a point where everything's behind you and just running behind, trying to put fires out like everywhere else, and you literally step into that people hat, as you guys call it.
I'd love to draw another parallel or an analogy here, because it's not just production or like the product manager thing. Even games themselves, like I see them as very similar. Because I see a lot of people talking about slots games or like, oh, I want to work on a FPS or like an RTS. And I personally, like, I did not ever want to work on a real money or a casino game, but I spent 2 years working on a slots game. What I've learned is majority of the games, they are the same, right? You have this 10 to 20% of the core gameplay, which is different, but you have so many systems which are the same across games.
Right.
Your underlying tech with like progression or player experience, the meta, the control systems, the camera system. Like there's so many overlapping things in games that what the game is really just a 10, 15, 20% of the whole game, which defines that, hey, this is of this genre. But when you're building games, a lot of it is very similar, and there's a lot of knowledge that is the same regardless of what genre or what scale of game you're working on. So a lot of things cross over when you're moving between genres, games, or like scale on mobile or console.
True,
So,
that makes a lot of sense. I wanna divert the topic a bit. Like, we did talk a lot, and we keep coming back to this. No matter what the question is, we keep coming back to people management somehow. I want to talk about the other side of that coin. What do we do about boss management? Like, there's a proper word for it. It's called stakeholder management, right? But
Management.
yeah. So you are, as a producer,
Put it delicately.
so actually it was my boss who taught me about stakeholder management. So that was a new box that was necessary at that point. So he basically sat me down and told me, like, there are people that you're managing, but there are other people that you're not managing. Those are called those stakeholders. They are giving you trouble. Let's figure it out. So I want to talk about that. Like, you are, as a producer, you are the layer between stakeholders who are thinking very macro level, and your team, which is thinking very deep root and micro level, right? You have one artist who's been working on the lead character's face for the last 4 days, and there is the CEO who's thinking really so macro, right? And he's handling like maybe 7 games that are in production at the same time, and that's his mindset on the CEO level. And you are the layer who is like, letting the CEO interface with the team, and letting the team interface with the CEO. So how do you do that? How do you do stakeholder management? Yeah, I am pretty sure you guys have had some pretty funny or extreme experiences on this side of things.
So the key part for me always has been to figure out what exact information do they require. Because let's say I report back to the EP and the GM, and I kind of know that if they don't get this particular information, they will start getting restless.
Okay.
They will start getting restless. Oh, when is that releasing? What happened to that metric? So you just need to clear up expectations with them. Actually, what do you actually want to know? What do you care about? Do you care about which day this gets done? Do you care about which month this gets done?
Right.
Once you clear up that, do you care like if people are burned down? Do you care like can I just handle it, or do you really want to know? Once you get all the expectations cleared up, right? You set up some weekly cadence.
Right.
Like, it is very important that cadence. Your communication cannot be whenever you feel like, right? They know that, I don't know this information today, but tomorrow that report comes and I will get that information then. So I think that is very important. That is talking to them and clearing expectations as to what exact information they require, and setting up a regular cadence system for them. Communication.
Tejas, I'm pretty sure it doesn't apply to you right now, but what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, my take on it is like a lot of building of trust. That's one of the key things I look at, because the level of trust and the relationship that you have with your stakeholder, that's noise there. Like, that can really make a huge impact on even the work that you do with your team.
Right.
Because if your stakeholders trust you and your capability, even if things go wrong, it'll be much easier to manage and like keep things on track. Like, when I was still part of a different team and somebody else was a product owner, the most effective sort of producer I saw was when we had any issue, within like that same meeting, within like a few 3-4 minutes, they take a decision and then like unblock the team. A lot of bad producers that I worked with, they'd be like, oh, I don't like, okay, we have an issue, let me go back and ask the studio head or whoever, and then we'll come back to this in the next meeting, or like next whatever, like in an hour or 2 hours, or like next 2 days. But regardless, what that led to was the team was much slower because the decision making was much worse, and the people or the good producers who had the trust with the leadership of the studio and were able to make decisions faster, rather immediately, they were enabling the team to work much better. So if you sort of build the relationship with the stakeholders as well, and have sort of a relationship where you are allowed to make decisions, and then like be like, oh, by the way, this thing came up and this is what we did. And like in case things blow up, this is our like plan of action or whatever. Then you're like pretty much working a lot more independently. So efficiencies would be much higher. And yeah, I mean, I haven't had a lot of other issues where we've had to like not be on the same page, or like stakeholders would cause a lot more issue and like not let us get work done.
Okay, that's an interesting answer. Yes. I want to ask a different question. Okay, I want to ask you about tough questions. Like, sometimes the producers need to know when to, say that, oh, I don't know that yet. I'll come back to you with an answer. Like sometimes, like I used to write a lot of code, but I haven't written any code in the last 7 years, 8 years now. I've been in producer and product manager position. So if somebody comes to me and just asks me like, hey, are we using the Animancer plugin? Why are we using that? And I'm like, I don't know that right now. But we made that decision a month ago. I'm pretty sure I have the reasons documented somewhere. I'll get back to you. That's my way of handling it, because I learned that from a mentor, to tell people not to say that you don't know, not to say that, not to bluff, but to say that I don't know right now. I'll get back to you with an answer. How do you guys handle those tough questions? Like, producers are not supposed to be superhuman. They're not expected to know everything, but the team wants you to be that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I more or less follow what you just said. And I mean, if you at least have a superficial, absolutely sure that you're not, make yourself look like a fool by explaining it to them, then you do that. And then you tell them, okay, so this is what I know, but it's not the whole of it. So, and this is the right person to talk to. So
right.
That's how I've usually handled it. I mean, even if it's something to do with my job where I was unsure of, and I was just, bouncing off things. And if a programmer says, no, I think there's a better way to do this, I think this is something that would be much more efficient, then I take that. So
this is also a question of whether it's whether as a producer you're a conduit for information, or whether you're a conduit for connections. Like if somebody comes and asks me a technical question, I can either buy some time and give him a kind of good, decent answer, or I can immediately tell him, hey, go to that guy sitting over there, he knows the answer, right? So I can just connect. What would you do?
For me, as far as I'm concerned, based on my experience, it's been a mix of both. Because, of course, I'm not a tech person. I'm not from a tech background. So if it has ever been about something extremely technical, of course, I'll redirect him or her to the right, right person.
Right.
But on the other hand, if it was something related to a certain creative direction which I was aware of, or something in terms of design, I usually have been able to, clear them off at my level, because I have the habit of at least going through the design documentation and everything else at least once or twice. So that's how I've handled it, because always sending, juniors or people who are just in the just join the team to their leads every other minute of the day is not really ideal, because it tends to block them at some level.
Right.
That kind of situations I've handled at my level by making sure that I'm also aware of how certain things are when it comes to the project and the product.
Okay, I'm gonna raise up another question too here. Once I interviewed for a job at Zynga, and I was being interviewed by this really senior producer. Okay, he was as old as the game industry, as far as I knew. Okay, and
man.
I don't remember who that was. This was a long time ago, like 4 or 5 years ago. I have no idea. This is at least 4 or 5 years ago. So his last question was, this might give you a clue on who it was. I don't know. His last question was, do you think the producer's job is a thankless job? And I was like stunned, like, what do I say? Like, his real question is like, are you going to be frank about this, right? So I'm like, I thought about it for a while and I said, yeah, it is. So I want to ask you those. It kind of felt like that at that time. This is 4 years ago me, 5 years ago me. Like, what do you think? Is the producer's job a thankless job?
Really, so often I would feel, to give you a very small example, when I was working in Ubisoft, everybody used to get, like compensation leaves, OTs, and everything.
Right.
But the producer never got anything. But if you, the one thing that I can guarantee that you'll get if you know your team and know how to work with them and respect what they're doing is the respect back. So
Right.
it's a whole lot of give and take. So you get what you give. But one thing that I can guarantee, and from my experience, what I've gained is a lot of respect for what I do by making sure that I'm transparent in what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, so that you know where you're coming from.
Right. I wanna ask, add on to that a little bit, add on to my question a little bit. One thing is that this I heard from, we were just joking around. I was a producer at Moonfrog at that time, and the CEO of Moonfrog was in the room, and I was just joking, and he just said, "Yeah, like it can be tough being a producer because if you're working properly and you're doing an excellent job, nobody notices you, right? And the moment something goes wrong, it's like everybody knows to push the buck around and it eventually comes back to you, right?" And I'm like shocked.
That essentially makes you CIA.
Huh? I didn't catch.
Essentially makes you the equivalent of CIA.
I didn't understand what you meant.
The CIA, man.
So,
CIA.
Well, when they screw up something, everyone knows. When they get everything right, no one.
Yeah. That.
I'd say the exact same thing about good tech. Because if you have good tech in your game, nobody would notice it. Like, oh, the frame rate is great, or load times are great,
Right.
everything works smoothly. Nobody would say anything.
Right.
But if you have issues, you have like bad frame rates, bad load times,
They'll notice it.
crashes, then everybody would know. So these are some of these roles where if you're doing anything great, nobody would know that you're
Right.
there.
Right.
And I think that's a good measure of success, because if you're not there in the team and everything falls apart, then
Right.
you're very much needed. But if everything is working well oiled, well greased, and you can just sit back and let things work on their own, then you've done a perfect job.
Right.
So yeah, and then the only other thing I'd add is, like, I used to think about a lot of things about it being thankless, but when you, especially in live games, right, when your users give you feedback or like appreciate how they love the game, those are some of those moments where you can actually appreciate and be like, okay, whatever I'm doing, like it's having some good impact, and life is good. Day-to-day things might come up where you'd be like, okay, why am I even doing this? Why am I even bothering? But then when players love your game, and then you're like, okay, yeah, it was all worth it.
True.
Yep. Absolutely.
We are about on the last 10 minutes of this session. So I would like to do two things. I will open up the floor for questions once again, if anybody has questions, or if there is no questions, we will go to a rapid fire round. Okay. Where I ask a question and I would expect everybody in the expert panel to not think too much about it, but give me a quick answer. Okay. So the floor is open. Does anybody want to ask any questions? Okay, I think we'll move on to the rapid fire round. Okay, cool. Everybody ready? Tejas, Akhil, Richard, Nija?
Sure.
Okay. If you couldn't use MS Project for the rest of your life, what is your favorite alternative to that?
Jira.
I'll do everything.
Excel sheet.
Okay.
Hate fucking Jira.
Okay. What if you couldn't use Jira for the rest of your life? What would be your alternative?
I'll be happy.
You'll be happy.
There's a new tool I'm using called Quire, which I use for like smaller level of management, so I might switch to that. But yeah.
There's something else that you guys might be interested, called codex.io. I mean, they're a startup, but it's developed by engineers, a lot of bunch of engineers. I can share
another game which they build it while building a game. It's pretty cool. I've heard of it. But they have a weird subscription model.
Okay.
I know it's a rapid fire question, but in my mind, any company, like most of the companies I work with, the founders and the leadership only understands Jira. They just want to see Jira.
Right.
Irrespective of how many new cool tools you bring in.
Yeah. They want to stick
But
to
you know what I'd say to that? I'd say that's a really amazing, awesome thing. Because I remember, like, a few years back, it was so difficult to move people to Agile and like Jira and all.
Right.
There was so much resistance.
Yes.
Exactly.
If the state of the industry is everybody likes Jira as the default, I'm so happy
It's not liking. Liking is gone. Like you don't like Jira, right?
You live with it.
Sure,
It's
but
like you're married to it.
everybody's using
It doesn't matter, right?
I think people are using it.
If you actually spend a lot more time on it, you'll realize how powerful the tool is. There's
Yeah.
a whole lot of cool stuff that you can do.
And it became so complicated that they have a simpler version of the
One
projects.
problem that I found with Jira is that you may be like expert in Jira, but then you have to spend enormous time to make sure your team understand and how. So, for example, how do you guys make sure that your team members update Jira on a daily basis or after a task? So it's really hard.
Like just like with any other process, something you have to reinforce to the team. So that will definitely take time. If the team is completely new to the whole setup, just like I said, just like any other process that is just being brought in, it'll take some time for people to get their heads around it and start using it properly. I mean, when I was during my first gig at Ubisoft, even they had a lot of friction towards working with Jira, and now I'm back in Ubisoft and everybody's like full on agile, following like solid PM practices and whatnot. So, and everybody is on board with it, and it was a welcoming surprise. And of course, and I'm not talking about a small gap. This happened over a span of 1.5 years. That was the time that I was not present in Ubisoft. So, I think it's just a matter of being patient and giving the people some time, and of course, reinforcing them with the fact that this is not for the product, the product or the project guys alone, but this is for your own benefit, for the team's benefit.
You have to literally sell it to the team so that they're convinced about it, right?
Yeah. So
you have to show the value. Right. Oh, okay. I have 2 more rapid fire questions left. I'll ask the simpler question first so that we can move on to the most controversial question, the last. Okay. This is the next question. Excel versus Google Sheets.
Google Excel.
Excel. Somebody said Excel.
Yeah.
Who said Excel?
I would say Google Sheets. I mean, for the past 1.5 years, I think I started using Google Sheets a lot more.
Right.
I think it's a little more flexible.
Man,
collaborative.
right. And Tejas was the one that said Excel, right?
Yeah.
You and me, bro. You and me. I love the keyboard shortcuts, but you know what? Google Sheets for collaboration. So
Yeah.
I like the multiplayer Excel, basically. That's what I got.
So I like Google Sheets version history and all, but I've had issues where like some people have spent like a lot of wasted time in just trying to get their own versions to mix
Right.
with like filters and whatnot. So I like it's so much easier to just put Excel sheet in Git repo and like do diff so much more easily. But definitely Google Sheets is much more powerful as long as people don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last question. Okay, this is probably the most controversial. Slack or Skype or Discord? Or are you going to say Microsoft Teams?
Discord
Discord or Slack? Either one.
I live on Discord. I used to use Slack, now I live on Discord.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Nice.
I think I'll go with Tejas right now. I think Discord is what I spend most of my time on right now. Well, thanks to this group and few other servers.
Yeah, I'm really
I
appreciating.
definitely say
Go on.
Discord can definitely use threads and like a bunch of features which
Right.
are easy to pass through all that information. But yeah,
We actually. Oh, go on.
The reply feature from Slack though, that is what I miss the most.
That's the thread thing that you were talking about.
The thread.
threads.
Yeah. So
We have reply now. We don't have threads yet.
Right. We kind of used both at Nukebox. We started with Slack, and then we ran out of the free tier, and and we tried out Discord just to see if it works. It's just a little bit of just a few changes, right? But the thing is, the lack of threads and inability to forcefully add people into a channel, right? You have to give them an invite, and they have to click on it, and then they have to commit, and then that kind of like got in the way of productivity. The threads was the biggest problem, and then we ended up buying Slack subscription eventually. So these 2 changes were strong enough to pull us back in there. Okay, I think that's it. That's it for a Monday session. This has been fun. Thank you very much. This was Tejas from Keijo, Akhil Dev from Ruby 7, Richard Francis from Ubisoft, Nijo Lawrence from Moonfrog Labs, and I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Peter Pavan from Super Gaming. I'm a product manager. I'm a lead product manager there. Thank you for coming, and we will be having more sessions. I'll let you guys know. Let's get together and hang out more. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thanks,
guys.
guys. Thanks for having me here.
Bye. Cheers.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.